Hello and welcome to Bonus Action Dash. My name is Jaren, and in this bonus Thursday night late night stream, I'm going to be talking about something that came out from Wizards of the Coast maybe about 3 weeks ago. This new OneDND playtest document. If you're a little bit out of the loop, Wizards has announced that come 2024, sometime in 2024, just in time for the 50th anniversary of D&D, they will be releasing the next version, the next iteration of D&D. They're not calling it 6th edition or 5.5. It's sort of a weird take. They're basically calling it, OneDND. That's the code name for this project is OneDND. I think the intention is that it's going to be simply an update to our current rule sets. That's intended to be all backwards compatible with the old stuff. So you can still use all the D&D content that you acquired over the last, would be 10 years. All your adventures should still work with these new rule sets. And the intention is basically over the next year and a half or so until it's released in 2024, we're going to get some new Unearthed Arcana playtest material about once a month that we can download, test out with our groups, and because it's meant to be backwards compatible, we should be able to inject it in our current campaigns, try it out with the current rule sets, with the current our current campaign materials, and it should theoretically work. And we can try it out, give our feedback, and they have a survey for you to go and fill out. That this current one for this specific document is good, I think, until the 26th of September. There's still 11 days left in that window of time to give your feedback. You can download it at D&D Beyond /1-DND. It's also linked right at the bottom of the homepage. I think the relevant material here, besides the actual document, which I've got open in another window, is if you can afford the time, I think it is this video here. Yeah, there's a 1-hour interview that you can watch, and they kind of give their justification for why these changes, why they're making these changes, and it gives you some insight into what each of these things is intended to do and why they're doing it. And so that helps when you're trying to evaluate and just figure out why they're doing what they're doing. So I wanted to give my feedback because I have been obsessively thinking about this ever since I read it, and I've watched a lot of other D&D streamers and YouTubers takes on this new playtest, and I really feel like the general consensus is thumbs up, yes, this is really good. And while I do agree with maybe half of that, I still feel like the other half is a big swing and a miss, and I think I have some different takes on it that I can't keep in any longer. I have to talk about this. I think even if this isn't heard on a playtest, if it's not even heard on a survey, if someone else out there hears this, it might spark a conversation. It might get on some social media. Even if it's not from me, it might get people talking, and they might hear my opinion and go, I was thinking the same thing, and I kind of agree. And I think the more we get people talking about this stuff in the next year and some change before this actually gets released, the better, because this is the game that I love, and I want it to be as good as it can be. And, we do have some time, so let's talk about it now. And before we get into it, I do want to preface, I understand this is simply playtest. The end result almost certainly will look very different. So that said, now is the time to talk about it. Now is the time to get upset and to wave our flags and to, voice our opinions. So, excuse me, let's get into it. This first document is all about character origins. And that includes things like race, background, languages, how your character is built. This doesn't get into anything about how classes work, so that'll be for a future document. We also have some new approaches to how feats work, and some new defined terms, some new ways that certain formerly optional rules work in this new document, and a new take on the spell lists, which I'm going to save till the very last, I think. Maybe we'll talk about some other stuff if there's time. But that said, I'm going to go through the whole document for the most part and maybe skip over some stuff that's not really necessary to talk about. First of all, let's start at the beginning with character races. And right off the bat, in this gray box here, we see how they are going to be approaching half races going forward. This is assuming that this document's going to work this way. And that is to say, instead of defining half elf and half orc and half anything else going forward, with the assumption being that half means it's human and something else, they've defined here and said, you know what, players, you can do whatever you want. We don't care anymore. We're not going to make definitions for every half combination. You can do whatever you want. The way that's going to work is you choose what it looks like. You can pick and choose the physical characteristics. Then you choose which of those two races is going to provide your game traits like size, speed, special traits, etc. You mix and match the visuals. And then to determine lifespan, it's just an average. So this is a very, very simplified way to do this going forward. I think this is just them saying, you know what, we're not going to give you definitions for every single combination because there's way too many. I think this is a good move. It's a smart move. Players were already doing this, and this is going to give you just a defined way to do it in the future with any combination that you want to do. And you don't have to homebrew it because here is a set of rules to do it. Next up is human. And the big change here is this is essentially, from what I understand, this is essentially the human variant of old, the human variant from the 2014 Player's Handbook. So, for example, you get an extra skill proficiency, you get an extra feat at level 1. Do want to mention, before we continue, a big change to feats that I probably can mention right now is that they are granted by your background at level 1. Every character based on your background gets a level 1 feat. We'll talk about what that means when we get to feats. So humans are still getting an extra feat in addition to that level 1 feat, and they get proficiency and an extra skill, and they also get this new thing called resourceful. They get inspiration whenever they finish a long rest. Big change to that. That's an entire section that I'm going to save, but generally my thoughts on humans is that it feels kind of like a lazy take on humans. I just think that there's so many things that you could do with this to make them feel cool and interesting instead of just saying, here's more stuff. You get inspiration, you get another feat, because we couldn't think of anything else. And by the way, you still don't have dark vision. So good luck, humans. I think they're always going to feel like kind of weak because they don't have dark vision, and like every other class, every other race in the game does have dark vision. So we'll see. Next up is this new race, brand new race called Ardlings. And Ardlings are meant to sort of represent animal folk, I think. They are, in function, kind of the counterpart to tieflings. Whereas tieflings are meant to be of a lineage from the lower planes, the evil planes. Ardlings are the exact opposite. They are from the upper planes, the celestial planes. And sort of like tieflings, you can choose your what's called a celestial legacy. And notice we're not calling this sub-races, we're calling this legacies. It's very similar for how they've made changes to, for example, dwarf, gnome, and elf, we'll get to. But you choose one of these 3 legacies, and based on that, at certain levels, you unlock different spells that you can cast, kind of like how tieflings work. So, for example, the Exalted, at level 1, you unlock Thaumaturgy. At level 3 is Divine Favor. And at 5th level is Restoration. Lesser Restoration, sorry. They also have this thing called Angelic Flight, which is a bonus action. You can gain flying speed up to your movement speed. You can do that twice per day. It's based on your proficiency bonus. And it's this works as long as you land on ground. If you're still in the air at the end of your turn, you just take falling damage and you fall. So it's kind of like a weaker flight. My overall takes on Ardlings, there's 3 main points here. Number 1, I think the flight's broken. Even though it is sort of a weaker version of flight, I think giving flight to level 1 in any form is going to be kind of busted, because this is basically twice a day you get bonus action dash. You know, you get to bonus action fly your movement speed, because you can just fly 6 inches off the ground or something. And this also, like, it removes any terrain-based obstacle, right, that the DM might throw at you. There's a gap in the terrain that you have to figure out how to cross. Oh, the Ardling can fly across. Well, there's a ledge you have to figure out how to get to. Well, the Ardling can fly. And it feels like that now puts the onus on the DM to like come up with new creative terrain-based challenges, or just say, you know what, fuck it, you guys have an Ardling, I'm not doing those types of challenges. Another thing that I wanted to point out about Ardlings is I'm not really sure what the point of this class is. I don't know if this is intended to take the place of our current animal folk like Tabaxi, Harengon, the new GIF race, Hippo folk. They just got released in the Spelljammer package. I don't know if this is meant to replace that. I don't think it is. It feels more like it's just Wizards going, you know what, we're not making new animal races because there's way too many of them. You want to play a dog person, you want to play a bear person, play an Ardling. We're not going to make new races, just play an Ardling. So I'm not really sure what the intention was, because I think we could probably already do that in some way. And the other thing, this is a big thing that I missed. My brother pointed this out when we recorded our podcast last night. Check it out on Spotify, Discussions and Dragons. We talk about a lot of D&D stuff. But I think this is a huge one. I didn't pick up on this right away. It feels kind of problematic, somewhere between kind of problematic and very problematic, to say that all Ardlings are from the good planes. All Tieflings are from the bad planes. And if we look at the spells, and it's not to say that all Ardlings and all Tieflings are good or bad, it's just the assumption that they come from those places, right? And if we look at the spells they get, every Ardling legacy gets very sort of divine-like supportive spells. Thaumaturgy, Light, Guidance, Divine Favor, Cure Wounds, Healing Word, Lesser Restoration, Zone of Truth, Animal Messenger. And if we look at the Tiefling list, I think I scrolled past it down here. Yeah, in the Tiefling class, or in the Tiefling race, their Fiendish legacies, which are of the evil lower planes, Abyssal, Chthonic, and Infernal. They get Poison Spray, Chill Touch, Firebolt, Ray of Sickness, False Life, Hellish Rebuke, Hold Person, Ray of Enfeeblement, and Darkness. These are all like very aggressive combat-centric spells, you know, things that negatively affect somebody else. And it feels kind of problematic to say that, like, yes, if you're a Tiefling, you do bad stuff. And if you're an Ardling, you do good stuff. I don't think that feels really good. I have a feeling that a lot about Ardlings isn't going to make it to the final product. But let's continue on so I don't harp on that too much. We have Dragonborn, which I think the big change to Dragonborn, it's kind of weird that we're now seeing a third attempt at making Dragonborns. I don't know enough about Dragonborns to really make a deep evaluation of this, but it is a straight downgrade from the previous version, right? Because the breath weapon is strictly worse. Other than that, I'm not really sure. I don't play Dragonborns that much. I'm not sure why they needed to nerf the breath weapon, because that's kind of like the whole reason you play Dragonborn, I think. And it wasn't really overpowered to begin with, I don't think, so not really sure. Dwarfs. Like I mentioned, Dwarfs and Elves, and I think Gnomes as well, if Gnomes are even in here. They might not be in here. Gnomes are in here. I just forgot to put them in my notes. Gnomes, Elves, and Dwarves, now, instead of saying they have sub-races, they're just lineages, right? They're no longer sub-races. Maybe it's not true for Dwarfs. The Dwarfs didn't have sub-races, but Elves, for example, they're just lineages. But I think the main change here, I might be missing some other things, but they made a big change to the stone cutting feature, and this is super cool. I think stone cutting was a feature that almost no one ever used, but now with this new version, as a bonus action, you gain Tremor Sense, which is strictly defined in the document later on. You have Tremor Sense out to 60 feet for 10 minutes, as long as you're touching stone. And you can do this number of times per day equal to proficiency bonus, which is really in line with like how they've been doing things since Tasha's. But Tremor Sense, very, very cool and thematic. You could be in a dungeon and use this to your advantage. You could be in like literally any city and go, well, I'm standing on a stone road. I have Tremor Sense out to 60 feet. I'm going to be able to tell if something's moving on the other side of that door, you know, or whatever it is. That's just a really cool racial feature and very thematic to dwarves as a whole. So very, very on the mark. I like that a lot. Elves, I think they didn't really change much with elves. The two things that I want to comment on, besides the fact that they're not sub-races, they're lineages now, is the fact that the drow no longer have sunlight sensitivity. And I would assume that enemy drow no longer have that as well. I think this is just a positive change, because if I think back to any time that I didn't play a drow, it's because of that specifically, because I went, oh, well, they're cool, but they have sunlight sensitivity, and we're going to be in a city a lot. We're not playing around in the Frostmaiden, so I don't think I want to play a drow. So I think that was a smart move, and it really makes, you know, it gives me more reason to play them. The other thing to mention here is the first level feature of the High Elf. Not the fact that they get the Prestidigitation cantrip, the fact that after a long rest, whenever they finish a long rest, they can swap that out with another cantrip from the new arcane spell list. And that seems very strong. I don't know how strong that is, but on paper, that just feels a bit strong as a racial feature. I don't know. We'll have to see. I think everything else is the same, except how trances work is the same. It's just they have a defined change to how long rests function, which we'll get to later. Gnomes, sort of the same take on gnomes. They, instead of calling them sub-races, they're now just lineages. All good. Halflings, I'm pretty sure halflings are mostly the same. We now have a defined set of rules for how orcs work, which is really good. I think these seem really cool. If not, maybe a tad on the weak side, but still really cool that we now have a definition for how they're going to work. And tieflings already talked about. Kind of problematic that they're being pushed into the corner of being of an evil lineage, and you get evil kind of spells. Not much more to say on that. Wizards, not a good move. Next up is character backgrounds. And besides how backgrounds function, the big overall change to the document is they're making the default be build your own background. We'll tell you how to do it. If you don't want to do that, here's some sample backgrounds, which is, I think that's great. And they're also moving your your bonuses to stats to your backgrounds instead of going on. They got rid of racial abilities. They're now bonuses based on your backgrounds. I think for better or for worse, that's a really good move. But let's take a look here. And also, like I mentioned before, you get a first level feat with your background. Additionally, if we just kind of take a look at some of these sample ones, they've really kind of smoothed them all out to be on equal ground. Right? So instead of certain backgrounds giving you like an actual benefit to your campaign, like the sailor background lets you get on any ship for basically free. Folk hero let you stay in taverns. Some other, I don't remember the name of the one, but there's one that lets you basically find food when you're out and about. I think it might be called Hunter. I'm probably wrong. These now are all very equal. They don't grant you in-game benefits aside from your ability scores. And depending on what feat you take, I suppose, could be, you know, said to be better or for worse. Then the equipment on all these, I kind of like this. They said basically you have 50 gold. Here's some equipment if you want to choose a background, and here's the leftover gold. So like no particular background gets more than another one for gold. You don't have to take these. You can pick and choose even. You can say, well, I don't want to copy a background from the book, but I don't want to have to figure out what equipment to buy. So I'm just going to look at, we'll take the charlatan's equipment because I don't want to figure out what equipment to buy. It's fine. Another thing that I've noticed here is they don't seem to have anything mentioning like Dungeon Delvers pack, Explorers pack, those pre-made bundles of equipment that all had, you know, torches and a bedroll and hempen rope. Maybe they're just going to make you buy that stuff now. I don't know. Maybe those are going to come with your class. We haven't seen that. That'll be in a future document. We'll have to see. But overall, I think backgrounds, big positive. I think most people probably are already building their own background. But I think the major change here is putting the default as do it yourself, and the option number 2 is pick one. I actually didn't realize that in the 2014 Player's Handbook, there is an option to do it by default, but to do it on your own, and rules to do it on your own. It's tucked away way at the very end. I think that's why I missed it. But this is probably the part that I like the best in this document, is these new backgrounds. So let's continue. We have a defined list of starting languages. So when you choose your background, I think the way that this works is you automatically know Common, you automatically know probably the language associated with your race, although it is weird that it wasn't specified, except for in Tiefling. I'm not really sure what that's about. Or not in Tiefling, I think in Dragonborn is maybe the one. But then your background grants you a language from one of these rare languages, which is kind of neat. I think this is a good change, and I like that they have all these listed out now. I still am not entirely sure, since your language is your secondary rare language is granted by your background. And let me just make sure that I'm accurate on that. So background features, choose one language from the standard list and the rare language list. Yes, so you automatically know Common, then you choose one from each list. That means, and I suppose you would have to justify this based on your character backstory, that means anybody can choose to learn Thieves' Cant, even if you're not going to play a rogue. You know, anybody can learn Druidic, even if you're not playing a Druid. You know, it does say, like, oh, these are the typical users, but it doesn't have to be. Based on these new rules as written, you can choose any of these rare languages, and that kind of feels weird to me, but I'm not going to get hung up on it. It's just languages. Next up, we've got the new list of feats. The big change here is that every feat in the game will have a level associated with it. The way that they describe this, and every character based on your background will start with a level 1 feat. The way that they explain this is that feats will kind of work like class features that don't belong to a class. So you have to meet the level requirement before you can take that feat. So when we're going through these level 1 feats, they're going to be familiar because a lot of them are the same as the 2014 Player's Handbook feats. They're just watered down, scaled back because they're now level 1, not the former level 4 ones that you're used to. So I'm not going to evaluate them based on how strong they are compared to their old self. I'm gonna evaluate them based on how strong they feel compared to the other level 1 feats. I do think that giving everybody a level 1 feat right off the bat, good move. I think that really helps to define your character and who they are, what they do. So let's get into these feats, shall we? Lots to talk about here. First up is the Alert feat. This is slightly different than the current 5th edition Alert feat, which gives you a +5 to your initiative. This one gives you a bonus based on your proficiency bonus. So early levels, it's worse. As you get higher and higher level, it's going to meet that +5, eventually going beyond that. And I guess to make up for that, they gave you this really neat feature, which allows you to swap initiatives with another player in kind of a cool strategic way. So I think overall this feels about the same strength. We'll have to see how good that initiative swap is in practice. I think with the right combination of classes or party composition, it could be really, really good at later levels, especially if you have an assassin rogue. Could be insane if somebody has the Alert feat and a really good bonus to their initiative. Next up is the Crafter feat, and I think this is brand new. The way that this one works is you get more, up to 3 more tools proficiencies or artisan tools proficiencies. And also you get a bonus on buying non-magical items of 20% and a 20% discount on the time it takes to craft items. I think this feat is super garbage. It's not good enough. This 20% off on the time crafting is very, very weak. And I also think we need a more clearly defined system for crafting than currently exists. It does there. It just doesn't. It's not really fully fleshed out. But like my point with the crafting time is like, why would someone spend almost a full in-game year crafting plate armor when they can probably go into most mid-level dungeons and just kill an enemy and get one for free? It doesn't really make any sense. Maybe this works for like lower tier items. It might be somewhat good, but it's still 20% time discount is super weak. And also this money discount, I'm not so sure about. I feel like a lot of parties do this anyways, where it's a thing where it's like, you go into a town and you want to buy some gear. It does specify non-magical items. So like you want to buy some gear and you role play trying to barter with the, the shopkeeper. And based on your roles and based on your role play, you might get a discount. You might convince them that, well, we're spending like 150 gold on gear here. Can't you like throw us a bone, give us some discount? And I feel like this feat just takes the place of that. And it doesn't really make any sense. Like, just because you're a crafter means you can walk into any store and demand a discount. What if you're on bad terms with that town's mayor or whatever? Or you just made enemies out of everybody. I don't know that this makes any sense, and it's also super weak. So gonna have to buff this if you want me to pick it. The healer feat, this is also slightly different. And I actually pulled it up here because I wanted to talk about a broken part of this that I was only pointed out to me yesterday by my brother in our podcast. The old healer's feat. You could use a healer's kit, stabilize a dying creature, and then get rid of gain 1 hit point. You can also, as an action, spend a use of the healer's kit to restore 1d6 plus 4 HP to it, plus an additional hit point equal to their maximum number of hit dice. And you can use this feat. You can use points from this feat once per short or long rest. And healer's kits is for stabilizing things. They got 10 uses. They're 5 gold. Really, really good early level item to pick up. The new healer's feat, it kind of makes it more useful in a broader sense, in that you can, as an action, this kind of works the same. You get to go over and use a healer's kit to restore some hit points, and also you get to reroll ones. So that's kind of nice because it sucks to roll ones when you're restoring hit points. The big change here, which kind of turns this into a bit of a broken feat, is that they removed this restriction of saying you can't regain HP until you finish a short or long rest. So that means if I have the healer's feat and I buy a 5 gold healer's kit, I can use all 10 of those uses in one shot. And basically a 5 gold healer's kit turns into, I don't even know, it puts a regular 50 gold potion of healing to shame. This is like 10 uses of cure wounds for 5 gold without spending spell slots. And because you can just use all 10 of them, even on the same person, right? I wouldn't say broken. It's just a little bit over the top. Maybe they need to include that restriction still. Next up is the lucky feat. And I think this works exactly the same. They've redefined how your luck points work. Instead of having a straight up 3, you get a number equal to proficiency bonus. That's all cool. And they've also changed the wording to reflect probably more how it's intended to work, right? So instead of saying, well, you can just re-roll based on your luck points, it just says you get advantage, right? So there's no stacking so that you can roll 3 and maybe 4 times with the lucky feat. It's just advantage. So I guess not really much of a change here, just to clarify some stuff. Magic Initiate is the same feat. It's just defined differently based on the new rulings for the spell lists. So instead of saying choose one of these spellcasting classes, look at their list, and then choose some stuff, it's look at the arcane, divine, or primal spell list, choose some stuff. Instead of looking at 9 lists, you look at 3. So I think this is, just this feat, good change. But other than that, it works exactly the same. The musician feat, I have to scroll back up here. This is probably the most broken feat in this document. This is a new feat. You get proficiency with 3 musical instruments of your choice. Then after finishing a short or long rest, as long as you can play a musical instrument that you're proficient with, and you give inspiration to a number of allies that hear it up to your proficiency bonus. So at level 1, it's 2. We'll talk about inspiration a little bit later on, but I think in general that's kind of broken because of the way that inspiration works on a whole. Feels like it's just going to be breeding a whole lot of inspiration, and because this is a feat that anybody can have, it means that you can just like pass out inspiration like candy every day or in every short rest. And I feel like this, it kind of feels like a middle finger to bards, right? At least to me, because I would way rather have advantage than bardic inspiration. Like, I think I'd rather roll with advantage than get a D6 or a D8. Maybe once it gets to being like a D10, D12, bardic inspiration might be better. I don't know the mathematics behind that, but this is a feat that's not tied to class abilities. It's not tied to spell slots. It's just you can use it, So like bards have to burn class feature usages. They have to burn a number of bardic inspiration to do that. You just burn uses of the musician feat and no big deal. I feel like this is kind of broken. When I get to inspiration, I'm probably going to lose my voice because I'll talk about it way too much. Let's continue on. Savage Attacker is pretty much the same, except for this now includes all weapon attacks. So that means you can savagely attack with ranged weapons. You can throw a javelin savagely. You can fire a crossbow savagely. Whatever. It's a straight upgrade, so cool. Skilled is exactly the same, except for they removed tool proficiencies for some reason. Not much to say there. Tavern Brawler. I think... Yeah, this was some slight changes to the current 5e Tavern Brawler. I think I like most of what this has to say here. And they did take away, once you hit with the Tavern Brawler feat as an unarmed strike, you can bonus action grapple, but that's included as a new definition for unarmed strike. So probably makes sense. The one thing that I think is a bit over the top busted with this is the option to shove. So now with Tavern Brawler, when you hit with an unarmed strike, you can... I think that you have to, it was when you hit with an unarmed strike, you can, for 0 dice contest, no contested check whatsoever. No, you know what? I need to scratch this because this is part of the unarmed strike. That's way more of a broken feature than I remembered. I think this is fine. Being able to shove, push something 5 feet away, totally fine. We'll get to unarmed strike later. Sorry for that. So much to go through here. So I think overall this is probably a good feat. Tough is literally the same feat. So I don't need to talk about that. The rules glossary. And I will do these spells last. So let's start off with generally I want to say that if the next player's handbook has a rules glossary at the end of it, hell yes, thumbs up. I like that some of this stuff could just be defined in a glossary rather than taking up real estate in the book. But let's take a look here. So first, let's talk about artisans' tools, gaming sets, and musical instruments, because these are kind of the same as in terms of how they're being defined here. Artisans' tools, gaming sets, and musical instruments now. It still uses the same list as the player's handbook, with the change being, instead of them all costing different amounts or slightly different amounts, they're all a standard cost. All musical instruments, 20 gold pieces. All gaming sets, 1 gold. All artisan's tools, 15 gold, right? So I think that's probably a good change. There's no going to be no weird disputes over the cost of your tools. It's all one standard cost. So, good change. Creature type, I think this is really good that this is defined in a player-centric document. Surely this is a good thing. Not much to say here. D20 test. Coming to the first point in the glossary, it really rubs me the wrong way. The point with this is a new term. D20 test is meant to be a term that encompasses the three things you normally do with a D20, which is attacks, ability checks, and saving throws. So if something in the document says D20 test, it's talking exactly about those three things only. And the reason I think this is a really stupid term, it's not really intuitive. It's kind of clunky. I asked a bunch of people, a bunch of experienced DMs and players before reading this document. I said, hey, do you intuitively know what D20 test means? And they could kind of guess, but no one really knew what it meant. And then I said, do you know what roll a D20 means? And of course, we all know what roll a D20 means, especially if in the context of explaining the rules to a brand new player, we're talking about explaining what an attack roll is, and what a saving throw is, and what an ability check is. We use roll a D20 all the time. And if we look at the 2014 Player's Handbook, under the D20 rules, I think one of the first things that it says is, in most cases, you roll a D20 to do three things: attacks, ability checks, and saving throws. So I kind of feel like this brand new term meant to simplify things that I will have to explain to new players in order to make it simpler is completely unnecessary. We can just say whenever you roll a D20. We don't need to say whenever you make a D20 test, because that's really clunky and weird. And I also kind of worry that if they're making this new term, it's going to be very easy to just include all three of those things, especially in cases that used to be defined as being only one or two of those three things. We can just include everything under the new D20 test term, and things were separated out specifically and excluding one of those three for specific reasons. Some things were only relegated to ability saves. Some things were only attack rolls and saving throws, for a specific reason. So I think the danger of including everything all the time in the D20 test terminologies, that doesn't sit well with me. So for me personally, I'm never going to be using that terminology. I will always just say, whenever you roll a 20, or whenever you make an attack, ability check, or saving throw, whatever. Come up with a better word, wizards. That's all I'm saying. Rolling a 20. We have another really big change here. So a couple things here is, first off, two things. Rolling a critical hit. Where is it in the document? Oh, I skipped over it already. So a couple things with rolling a 20, and this includes anything ability check, saving throws, and attack rolls. Rolling a 1 and rolling a 20 is being changed to any one on any of those three, automatic failure, right? And rolling a 20 on any of those three, automatic success. And I think a lot of people were probably already doing that as part of a homebrew rule, but I think defining it in a player-centric document is bad, and I'll explain why. I dislike both of them for different reasons. Initially, when I was taking my notes, I thought, this kind of sounds good, because that means once you get to the mid and higher levels, you can't bonus your way out of failure. It means there's still going to be a possibility that you might miss or you might fail. And I think that does still kind of feel bad, because what if you build your characters to specifically be really good at certain things? Is that just up to the DM now to say, like, whereas you were going to make a roll before, now never mind, because there's your chance of success is so high you're not going to fail, so just don't bother rolling. On, level 20 rogue trying to pick a basic lock, I don't know. I dislike a 20 being an automatic success for different reasons. So here's an example. In current 2014 Players Handbook rules, a natural 20 means you get the best possible outcome, not you automatically succeed. And I think that language in a player document is very important. Now, I'm not really sure. It might actually be different terminology in the 2014 Players Handbook. But that said, saying that it automatically succeeds in a player-centric document can be very dangerous. And what I mean is, not for like attack rolls, which are very binary. An attack either hits or it doesn't. It's either, if you attack, the only question is, if you hit, the only question is it a critical hit or not? Right? It's not like if the AC is 15 and you get a 19, ooh, that's better. You roll more damage versus I roll a 16 against a 15 AC. It's all the same. It's an attack. You either hit or you don't. And I feel like saving throws, kind of the same thing. You either save or you don't. You either get out of the way of the fireball or you don't. They're very binary outcomes. Ability checks are definitely not. Right? And if I said, if a brand new player who read this document or who read, playing in the current rules said, can my level 1 character, or any level, doesn't really matter, can they intimidate the guards into letting us in the castle? It's completely feasible that they could try to do that, and let's say they roll a 20 and I go, as the DM, I think in my head, they were never getting in anyways, but probably what happens is the guards look at each other kind of seriously and then back to you, and then in unison they burst out laughing. They don't take you seriously. They act like you just were fucking with them. And then the player intuitively understands that we probably weren't going to succeed on that anyways, but at least we didn't get arrested, right? And in that example, there's a whole range of possibilities. Maybe they don't roll a natural 20, but they roll an 18. And the guards put hand on their weapon and say, hey, you better step back before we don't need this to go to bloodshed. And maybe they roll a 15 and suddenly the weapons are drawn and they're getting prodded back with swords. Maybe they roll a 9 and suddenly they're getting thrown in shackles. There's a whole range of possibilities. It's not simply, well, you failed, therefore you don't do it, or you succeeded, therefore you get in the castle. In this new suggested rule set, if a player reads a 20 is an automatic success and asks that same question, now I, as the dungeon master, need to make a decision. Do I let them roll? And when they roll a natural 20, I explain to this brand new player that even though the book says automatically succeeds, I need to explain to them that success means different things, and have a really hard conversation. Or do I say no to them and they're like, well, why can't I at least try? And in my head, I'm going, because I know that a natural 20 automatically succeeding is never going to happen, even though this entire stack of non-natural 20s could result in some cool outcomes that doesn't get you thrown in jail, I now have to say no to that entire stack because natural 20 not going to happen, or do I just explain to that player that, like, well, you can intimidate them into getting into the castle, but you can ask me something else, hint, hint. It's a really weird corner that I feel boxed into, and I don't want to tell a player that, hey, a natural 20 succeeds on anything, on any ability check. It's really strange. It doesn't really sit well with me. Attacks, sure. Natural 20 automatically hits anything. Saving throw, sure. You roll natural 20, you dodge the fireball. Ability checks doesn't really work that way. It really limits what I can say yes to, I think, as a DM, or I have to have a really complicated conversation with a brand new player who I just said D&D is great because you can do whatever you want and you can try anything. If you want to try something, I'll figure out what roll you need to make, except for that thing that you just asked. You can't do it. You can't roll. It's really weird. I don't like it. Additionally, with rolling a 20, I guess we'll talk about this when we get to the inspiration part. So let's continue on. The other change to rolling a 20 with attacks is the change to the way the critical hits work. This is a big miss in my opinion. Basically, what they have done here is said that critical hits only apply to those hitting with a weapon or unarmed strike. And player characters that have an unarmed strike or weapon attack. So casters can't critically hit, and monsters can't critically hit. And the second part of this is when you roll damage, your extra damage only applies to your weapon damage. So if you're a rogue and you critically hit, you don't get to double your sneak attack damage with this new proposed change. That second half, I think, is a horrible change because it feels really awesome and badass when you crit and you get to roll a billion dice and you're like, okay, cool. Let me do calculus for 5 minutes. It's 76 points of damage. That feels awesome. You know, I don't want to have somebody roll a critical hit and they're like, well, all right, it's 22 points of damage, you know, so cool, I guess. You know, it feels really kind of lame. I want critical hits to be big and feel cool. If you watch the video on this playtest, the one all the way at the bottom, that's the long hour-long interview, they talk about their justification for taking away critical hits from casters and monsters. The one for casters, they said, well, you know, a lot of times when casters are using spells to deal damage, it's saving throws and not attack rolls. So they're not really losing much. And I was like, well, let me actually like look at the data here. And I looked at the first 2 levels of a wizard spell list, and half of them were attack roll spells. So it's sort of like, yeah, Watsy, but no, because, you know, a lot of cantrips, a lot of level 1 spells are attack rolls. So you're just wrong about that. And their justification for monsters was, well, you know, 2 things. It really sucks when like your level 1 party, a monster crits and like one shots a level 1 character. That feels really bad. And you know, my response is like, well, yeah, but you know what also is not fun is like when your level 5 character dies, when you were just starting to get to know them. You know what also sucks is when your level 9 character dies, when you're not quite done to the end of their story arc. You know what really sucks is like your level 15 character dies when you spend a year and a half with them and you're not done with the campaign and they die and you spend all that time. That sucks. Every time a character dies, it's not fun. It sucks. That's part of D&D. The world being big and scary and dangerous is part of the game, and we need that to happen. We need it to feel threatening. We need characters to die sometimes. Us DMs aren't trying to do that, but I played D&D for a whole range of experiences and emotions, and I consume fiction, TV shows, movies, I read books, I play D&D because I want to experience a whole broad spectrum of ups and downs. I want the happiness and the joy and the success and overcoming, but I also want the failure and the heartbreak and the sadness and being disappointed and frustrated. There's a big difference between a positive experience and a satisfying experience, right? I don't need my D&D to be all happy, sunshine, and rainbows all the time. I don't need my character to be the hero all the time. I want there to be a progression over the campaign. I want it to feel, you know, I want to leave sessions feeling frustrated by a fight and feeling sad that I, you know, let another teammate down. I want to feel that because it's going to feel so much better when we overcome in the end. I need those things to happen. And so like making it much harder for those things to happen, for the character to die, from a philosophical standpoint, approach to the game, I'm not on board with. And if your logic is it sucks for level 1 characters to die, I think there's a way better way to fix this non-problem than simply nerfing every monster in the game. You know, fix your level 1 monsters. Maybe give characters a bit more HP at level 1. I don't know. You don't need to nerf monsters because killing level 1 characters sucks, because it's, you know, they have like 8 hit points. Maybe give them more hit points, or maybe make your early level monsters not deal as much damage. I don't know. There's got to be a better way to fix this. And their other justification was, well, you know, monsters kind of have their own critical hit in the form of recharge abilities, and you get to kind of choose when you let off that big thing. For example, like, you know, Dragon's Breath weapon. And it's like, yeah, but every character can critical hit. not every monster has recharge abilities. Most monsters don't have it until later levels. Your early level baddies don't get recharge abilities. Like your big end bosses have recharge, sure. But like most monsters in the game don't have that. Unless your intention is to completely revamp literally every monster in the game and give them all recharge abilities, which I'd be super on board with because that would make them really interesting and cool and not just be a sack of hit points. Um, I don't know. Wizards, fix your monster stat blocks. I'm tired of DMs doing it all the time for you. That's that's my rant on critical hits. This is a big swing and a miss. Critical hits should feel big and powerful and awesome, and monsters should feel big and scary sometimes and feel like the threat of death is on the table. Okay, now that I've ranted about that, we've got some new defined conditions in the form of grappled, incapacitated, and slowed. And I think overall I liked these definitions. I didn't notice anything that was glaringly wrong with it. There's probably some stuff that I'm missing. I'm glad that they're specifically defined, especially this new slowed condition, which works kind of how you'd think it would. It's half movement, attacks have advantage against you, and you have disadvantage on dex saves. It kind of makes me think that they're going to add more things into the game that cause this condition, which I think would be really cool. My hope also is that this isn't a nerf to the slow spell. I hope the slow spell doesn't just say you get the slowed condition, because that would be super weak. It shouldn't, even though it seems like wording wise, it seems like it might. It's probably not going to work that way. But overall, thumbs up on these condition definitions. Inspiration. We've got a definition for inspiration. I guess the big change here, a couple of things. One, whereas it was formerly an optional rule set that tables could or could not use, you could use it as they suggested, or like my current Monday night game, we all get one inspiration die at the start of the session that only lasts that session. It's a one-time use, and we can hand it off to another player character because we want them to succeed and we want to encourage the narrative to go a certain way, and that's a really fun way to do it. This document says, nope, we are taking this thing that a lot of people did optionally and we're making it a new hard-coded rule. This is the way it's going to be. And how it works, you can still, as the DM, give out inspiration. That's not changed, but the new way to get it, the most common way to get it, is to roll a natural 20 on anything, any of these new D20 tests. You roll a natural 20, you get inspiration. If you already have inspiration, you hand it off to another fellow party member. You lose all of it at the start of a long rest, and you can't stack them. You only get one at a time. So some of that hasn't changed, but the way you get it is really ridiculous. Any D20 test is straight up stupid. And I feel like the obvious thing here is that you're just going to ability check grind inspiration until you have it, right? You're going to ask your DM for every and all check they'll let you get away with. When you go into a dungeon, hey, what do I notice about the walls? Can I check for traps? Is there any secret doors on the walls? Do I notice anything about that tapestry? Is there any history about it that rings true? I'm going to start reading the books that I brought with me. Do I gather any weird, facial tics from my party members? Do I believe what they're saying? Because you know what? The more times you roll a d20, the more chances for inspiration. More chances for you to roll a natural 20 and get inspiration. My stupid example here, which is really not too far-fetched, and it, theoretically should be allowed, rules as written in this document, is to play a human, take the musician feat, give myself a negative strength score. And what I'll do, I wake up with inspiration every day, so I always have it. Start of every day, I clack 2 drumsticks together once, give 2 allies inspiration. Then, whenever we run out of inspiration, as we're walking to the next destination, I go, oh, by the way, DM, in this 2-hour walk, I've been making unarmed strikes against my ally, and because I have a negative strength score, they don't take any damage. That's 1,200 dice rolls in the last 2 hours. I'm assuming that we all have inspiration now. Is that cool? And I feel like it's just going to, that's really kind of an outlandish example. I'm not going to be that guy, but it's not too far-fetched to think that players are just going to grind ability checks now and to try to get inspiration, to where it's going to like make DMs be an asshole and be like, no, you guys, we're done. You can't keep asking for ability checks. No, you can't roll. And it really feels gross and bad to have to do that, you know? And this is encouraging the wrong thing. And it's really, to me, inspiration is supposed to feel like a big and cool thing that you get sometimes, not this thing that's handed out like candy all the time. Also, I feel like, yeah, a couple other points. If you are a class that makes a lot of D20 rolls on your attack turn, such as fighters and barbarians, who in middle levels get multiple attacks every turn, that means you're going to get more chance to get a D20 and more chances to get a natural 20 and get inspiration. If you're a class like a caster, who, according to WotC, don't make attack rolls that often, that means you have less chance to roll a natural 20 and get inspiration. So, like, why is that disparity there? And it also makes me as a DM a little hesitant to start asking for more group checks. You know, if I've got to play, a party of, 4 to 8 characters, whenever I ask them for a stealth roll, that's 4 to 8 chances for inspiration, and I just feel like we're going to be in this. And if you think about it, it's like a never ending loop, right? It's like, well, if you've got inspiration, that means you're going to roll with advantage, and that's 2 dice rolls. That's more chances to get inspiration. The more dice rolls you're rolling, the more chance to get future inspiration, and it's just going to spiral out of control. Whereas the less you're rolling, the less chance you have to have it. So for those that don't have it, it's harder to get it. And if you do have it, you've given out like candy. This thing that's supposed to feel special. And another weird example is, since this is tied to ability checks, right? I could be somebody with, an Arcana type of a background, and while my party is doing one thing, I'm like, hey, I want to go up to my room alone, and I'm going to look into a book that I have from my backstory that I haven't told anybody about yet. I'm not planning on telling anybody about it yet. DM, do I know anything about what this book might mean? And they say, make an Arcana check, and I roll natural 20. And I go, well, I already have inspiration. What justification is there for giving another party member inspiration based on me looking at a book by myself in a room on something I'm not going to talk about to my party about? It's weird. I guess I could just say I'm not giving them inspiration, but it's a weird approach. It's a weird thing. And if you're taking the musician feat, you're just giving it out more. I don't like this inspiration ruling, and it's hard to say no to it. This document makes it hard to opt out because it then affects humans who get inspiration. It then affects the musician feat, who has something to do with inspiration. It's a lot harder to opt out of this thing. Wizards, let me opt into your cool shit. Don't make me opt out of your bad stuff. Next up is long rest. The big change here to long rest, it's exactly the same, I think, except for the way that long rest is interrupted. And this now is changed to, if your rest is interrupted by any sort of like encounter or long march or spell casting for up to an hour or a similar activity, you no longer get the full benefits of a long rest. It just starts over completely. So you can't get woken up by a fight, go back to bed, and finish your long rest. You have to start all over that 8 hours long rest or 6 hours long rest. Unless you get up to it, at least an hour, you can count it as a short rest. I think this is cool, but also I'm not sure if that's prodding me in the direction as a DM that, hey, I might want to consider like throwing in more middle of the night encounters, because they're going to totally mess up the party's long rest. And now they're, dealing with exhaustion the next day, which, like, exhaustion never really comes up. So maybe this is intended to make that more relevant. I don't know. Tool proficiency. Here's another thing I think is kind of broken that I think a lot of people that have reviewed this that I've watched have missed. And if we look at the definitions for tool proficiency. It's down at the bottom here. Whoops, and continues over on the top. Here, I'll try to. There, we can fit it all on one window. The way that this has changed now, or specified now, is if you've got proficiency in a tool and you also have the accompanying proficiency in the skill that's associated with that, you get to roll with advantage, right? Which sounds awesome, great. Like, great, I'm gonna roll with advantage on my tool proficiencies now. The thing is, it's not going to make your formerly unused tool proficiencies now useful, right? It's not going to make your cobbler's tools and your brewer supplies now more useful. But what it will mean now is that every rogue in the game forever going forward with this new rule will pick locks with advantage. They'll check for traps with advantage. They're going to disarm traps with disadvantage. Because rogues are definitely going to be proficient in sleight of hand and dexterity. That's how you build rogues. They're never not going to be proficient in those skills and proficient in thieves' tools, right? That's how you build the thing. And I have a background with competitive card games. I played Hearthstone for a very long time. And there were sometimes mechanics in that game that said, if your deck is built in this way, do X. A card might say, if your deck has 40, unique cards in it, meaning no duplicates, do this thing, and that was never a problem, because if it said that thing, if it was like, if this condition is met, do really cool thing, you built it in such a way that it always did the cool thing, right? And if this new ruling says, if you have proficiency in the skill associated with your tools, roll with advantage, you are always going to build your characters so that that's a true statement. So rogues are always forever going to roll with advantage on lockpicking and checking for traps and disabling traps. And because they're doing that, and this is a thing that they do all the time anyways, that means more advantage, more chances for inspiration. That's twice the amount of rolls on those things they're doing all the time anyways. So I think this is kind of an over-the-top buff to tool proficiencies. Tremor Sense is the next thing in the document, and this is, it's not a change, it's just the fact that it's actually defined for players. So this is really nice. Unarmed Strike is defined in the document. It's kind of fleshed out a little bit. I guess the changes here that I would have liked to have seen is, I think I would have liked to have seen at least, something that said, damage for unarmed strikes is 1 plus strength mod, parentheses, minimum of 1, right? I'm playing a character right now that has a 7th strength, which means they can never unarmed strike for a single point of damage, which means literally the weakest monster in the game of Dungeons and Dragons can hit harder than I can at level 20. If I level this ranger up to level 20, I'm probably not buffing their strength, but that means me, an experienced level 20 ranger, the hardest I can punch is still weaker than the weakest thing in D&D can bite or hit or whatever it is. And it's kind of silly. That I can't even punch somebody in a weak spot and do damage. That seems a little silly because they've defined unarmed strike to be 1 plus strength mod, and your strength mod can definitely most certainly be a negative number. The other thing I would have liked to seen here is this new thing that says shove. This is this thing that I almost ranted on before in Tavern Brawler, but it's actually, I made a mistake. It's in Unarmed Strike. So here, as long as you hit with an Unarmed Strike, all you need to do is roll your attack with Unarmed Strike, hit, meet or beat their AC. You can do one of these things, including shove. Is you can either push them away 5 feet, that makes sense, or you can knock the target prone as long as they are not more than 1 size bigger than you. No contested checks. They just have to be kind of close to your size. All you need to do is hit them with an unarmed strike. You knock them prone, which means all your melee attacks now attack with advantage. right? And well, we know how advantage is broken with this new inspiration. That's going to mean more chances to get more inspiration, right? Yahoo. But I do feel like no contested check whatsoever. Just hit him with an unarmed strike, they're prone. You can take the shove option and knock him prone. I think that's a bit broken. That is it for the glossary section. And now let's talk about these new lists. So Wizards now has said in this document, I'm reading right off the thing. There are now 3 main spell lists in the game: Arcane, Divine, and Primal. And if we go to the way that these are defined, and they do say that, you know, we're going to define in a future document how classes work, how classes access these new lists, and how they might access spells from a different list. If we go to how these are defined, you know, it says, oh, for example, arcane spells draw on the ambient magic of the multiverse. Bards, sorcerers, warlocks, wizards, and artificers harness arcane spells. And it's similar for primal being ranger and druid, and divine being cleric and paladin. So there's a few different ways that this could work, and this list is only cantrips and first level spells. A few different ways this could work. I have theories based on the context. It could simply be intended for use with the Magic Initiate feat and anything else that says, you know, go look at one of these 3 spell lists. Maybe going forward, anytime they make a new class that's a caster, they don't have to make a whole brand new spell list for it. They just say, yep, you get the arcane list. I don't think that's likely the case, because it's defined as there are now 3 main spell lists. It doesn't say there are now 3 new lists. It says there are now 3 main lists. So I think the other option that this could be, which I also don't think this is the case, is that these could be the new class spell lists. You know, wizards, bards, warlocks, and artificers and sorcerers, this is your new list. I don't think that's the case because, well, for example, like cleric and ranger, rangers don't have cantrips. So they couldn't say, yep, here's your list, because they don't get cantrips right now anyway. So I don't think that's the way that it's going to work. My guess is how it would work is when you make a wizard, for example, it'll say, pick 6 cantrips off the arcane spell list. At first level, get X number of first level spells off the arcane list. When you level up, get X number of spells off of, you know, and so on and so forth. But I think even that, I'm really terrified for the future of classes, because I feel like it's moving in a direction that's going to make classes feel very samey, right? If we look at the list and if we were to compare like what everybody's getting, what everybody's losing, I think for the most part, wizards, because they had the longest spell list, they're not really losing or gaining anything. You know, if you kind of read through here and you're looking at this going, oh, okay, Arms of Agathis, Armor of Agathis, Arms of Hadar, Hex, you know, there's some things that are now on a list that a wizard could access. They don't lose anything, so you'd think, okay, cool. Wizard remains unchanged. They get some stuff. Great for wizards. If we were to look at bards on the opposite side of this thing, bards traditionally had a much shorter spell list, and they can now have a lot of the same stuff that they had before. I might still have, there's a thing I wanted to take a look at. I think I might have closed the window. I had a whole document up where I compared lists based on what they have now versus what this new list gives and takes away. And for example, bards are losing a lot of stuff they formerly had access to, a lot of really good support spells, and they're getting a lot of stuff that's like very combat centric. And this trend continues for most of these classes. It feels very weird to me. Like, yeah, cool that you're not stuck playing a support bard, but I'm like, you know, if all these classes kind of have access to the same spell list, what separates them and makes them feel unique and special and different? I don't feel like, maybe wizards is a special case, but when I pick a wizard, it's because of their spell list. It's because I want to do those really identifying things, those characteristic spells like Counterspell and Fireball and Identify. And not to say that they're the only classes that get those, but typically those, Wizards are the ones that do that. Outside of the player's handbook, I have to look outside of the player's handbook to get some interesting wizard subclasses. I think the ones in the PHB are not really interesting that much, and and it's like, why play a wizard who has to spend money and resources to put spells into a spell book when I can play a class that doesn't? I can build them the same. I'll play a bard and I'll make him like a wizard. I'll pick all the same stuff that I would have picked as a wizard, but I'll just play a bard. Why play any specific class if they all kind of feel the same? And yes, we don't yet know how these classes are going to work, because that's in a future document. We can take a guess, and I already don't like... Yeah, sure, on paper, it looks good. It looks streamlined and nice and pretty, but at what cost, Our classes just going to all feel kind of samey going forward? I don't really like that. It's not a direction that I like. And another thing that's really weird here is, like, clerics getting paladin smites, clerics getting, searing smite and thunderous smite and wrathful smite. Those things that, like, used to only be for paladins. I guess you can now play an attack cleric, which is basically a paladin. I don't know. Maybe I'm simplifying it too much. I will say, trying to find some silver lining, a positive in these lists. If you're reading through it with any sort of scrutiny, you'll see on the list that warlocks are intended to access, the arcane list, missing is Eldritch Blast. I'm going to take a not so far-fetched guess and say it's not because they're getting rid of Eldritch Blast, but probably more than likely, they're just going to make that a class feature, which it always should have been. That's the class that Eldritch Blast was built around. It's probably just going to be a class feature going forward, not available to other classes as a cantrip, which is kind of good, because that means you're not taking up your cantrip spots with Eldritch Blast. You can now take some other potentially utility things that might, make warlocks feel more versatile. Maybe that fact is going to make warlocks way better. I don't know. So that's my hour-long hot take. I do have some more things to talk about. Maybe that'll be maybe we'll do that next week, next Thursday night. But there's still some other changes. If you watch that video, there's still some other changes Wizards is proposing. Mainly, I want to talk about their direction and the new VTT, as somebody that's only done online games in the last 2 years. So that'll probably be a different video, because it's an hour and 15 into this stream, and my voice is kind of shot at this point. So I guess if you've watched and made it this entirety, thank you. I'll be putting this up on YouTube as well. Thanks for tuning into this late night stream and sticking around. If you are here, and tune in still this Sunday, 5 p.m. Central, we'll be doing the usual pre-game session prep stream for my Sunday night game, Rime with the Frost Maiden. We're hitting episode number 50, session number 50. I'm so excited. And we'll talk about what happened last game with that. So thank you for watching if you are here, and we'll see you all next time.